But you and Diddy, you and Puff cool?
No, I don't really rock with
Okay, damn.
I'm at a point in my life, like, we all grew up in the streets, and we try to be better, but...
Bothering me is that being a celebrity sometimes comes with, like, everybody wants to be successful in a celebrity and stuff like that, but it comes with, you know, bullshit sometimes, and, you know, that's the only thing that I hate about it.
And when I say people respond, how people respond to things matter, like the internet will take to it and just go off with it. Meek responds being the uncomfortability. He goes, yo, nah, I gotta spend $100,000 to find out why my name is in this like this. And it's in it only because he's uncomfortable. You don't hear him talking about French. French was right there.
The internet didn't just wake up confused, it woke up nervous. Because when the words alleged recordings start trending next to names like 50 Cent and Jaguar Wright, that's not gossip. That's a warning label. Suddenly timelines froze, group chats lit up, and everybody started checking what year it was. Like time itself might need an update. This isn't a random rumor floating through the algorithm. This feels like one of those moments where nobody knows what's real yet, but everyone knows it's serious. Alleged audio, explosive claims, names being whispered instead of typed, and two figures who thrive in controversy standing right at the center of it. Jaguar Wright, never known for subtlety, has been ringing alarm bells for years. And 50 Cent, let's be honest, chaos has been his brand longer than social media has existed. So when accusations start connecting those two to alleged leaked rap recordings, the industry doesn't laugh. It braces, because this isn't just about music. It's about secrets, power, and who controls the narrative. When private conversations allegedly go public, this situation didn't erupt out of nowhere. It crept in through side comments, cryptic posts, and long-standing industry tension that never fully disappeared. The moment accusations surfaced suggesting that 50 Cent and Jaguar Wright were somehow connected to alleged leaked rap recordings, the story immediately felt heavier than a normal viral rumor. Not louder, heavier. Because this wasn't about beef. It was about access, influence, and who allegedly has their hands on conversations that were never meant to leave private spaces. Jaguar Wright has occupied a controversial position in hip-hop conversations for years. She's been dismissed, dragged, praised, ignored, and rediscovered more times than most viral personalities survive. To supporters, she's been warning people about alleged industry behavior long before it became fashionable. To critics, she's been reckless with accusations and too comfortable naming names without evidence. That divide meant that the second her name re-entered the conversation alongside the word recordings, reactions were guaranteed to be extreme. Then there's 50 Cent, a figure whose relationship with controversy is not accidental. He doesn't just survive drama, he weaponizes it. From public feuds to online trolling, 50 has built a career on understanding how narratives move faster than facts. So when accusations began circulating that his name was linked directly or indirectly to alleged leaked recordings, the internet didn't ask if it made sense. It asked how it fit into a larger chessboard. And that's where the tension started multiplying, because leaked recordings imply access. Access implies trust, and trust implies betrayal. Even when nothing is confirmed, those implications alone are enough to rattle an industry built on private conversations and controlled images. At this stage, no verified source had authenticated any recordings. No legal filings, no confirmed releases. Just claims, counterclaims, and reactions spiraling faster than clarification could ever catch up. The first reactions weren't analytical, they were emotional. Social media moved instantly into speculation mode. Screenshots were shared without context. Clips were reposted without sourcing. Comment sections became mock courtrooms where everyone had already chosen sides. Some declared the allegations proof of long-rumored industry secrets. Others warned that this was misinformation, dressed up as revelation. Jaguar Wright's past made the moment even more volatile. Every previous claim she'd made was dragged back into the spotlight, either as evidence that she'd been right all along or as ammunition to discredit her entirely. There was no middle ground. The internet doesn't allow for maybe. It demands certainty even when none exists. 50 Cent's name being attached to the accusations intensified everything. Not because there was proof, but because of perception. People assumed intent. They assumed strategy. They assumed this was part of a bigger play, because 50 rarely moves publicly without understanding the ripple effect. Whether that assumption is fair or not didn't matter. It spread anyway. The rap industry's response was telling in its restraint. No immediate denials, no confirmations, no fiery rebuttals, just silence and carefully neutral posts that avoided the topic entirely. And in the internet age, silence is rarely interpreted as patience. It's interpreted as panic. Memes began circulating, but they weren't playful. They were nervous jokes, the kind people make when they're uncomfortable but don't want to admit it. Group chats on mute, PR teams clocking overtime, lawyers refreshing emails. Humor masked anxiety, and anxiety-fueled engagement. What made this story dangerous wasn't what had been proven, because nothing had. It was what the accusations suggested. Alleged recordings challenged the illusion of control. They threatened the idea that private conversations stay private. And whether true or false, once that threat enters public consciousness, it can't be recalled. Critics urged caution. They reminded people that unverified audio can be manipulated, edited, or entirely fabricated. Supporters pushed back, arguing that demanding perfect proof before listening is how powerful figures avoid scrutiny. The argument wasn't about evidence anymore. It was about trust. Who do you trust more, institutions or whistleblowers? And that debate split audiences cleanly down the middle. What escalated tension further was the lack of clarity around origin. Where did these alleged recordings come from? Who had them first? Why now? Timing in controversies is rarely accidental, and the absence of answers only fueled theories. Some speculated this was retaliation. Others suggested it was leverage. A few argued it was simply chaos being monetized. Through all of it, one thing remained consistent. Nobody could look away. Because if even a fraction of these accusations were accurate, the implications would extend far beyond one headline. They'd touch reputations, careers, and long-standing alliances. And even if the claims turned out to be false, the damage of association would linger. That's the trap of alleged leaks. You don't need confirmation to cause fallout. You just need attention. And attention was already locked in. By the end of this phase, the internet wasn't asking whether the recordings were real yet. It was asking who was nervous, who was quiet, who was watching instead of speaking. Because in controversies like this, behavior becomes evidence in the court of public opinion. And as speculation grew louder, one reality became impossible to ignore. This wasn't going to end quickly. Allegations involving recordings never do. They sit, they resurface, they get referenced long after the original context fades. The question wasn't whether this story would explode. It already had. The question was who would get pulled in next, and whether the truth, whatever it is, would ever fully catch up to the narrative already running wild. Once the accusations started circulating, the internet didn't just react, it reorganized. Timelines turned into surveillance boards, comment sections became interrogation rooms, and everyone suddenly developed a PhD in audio analysis without ever leaving their couch. That's what happens when the words alleged recordings collide with names that already come with gravity. The story stopped being about what was said and started being about who might be nervous. Memes hit first, because memes always hit first. But these weren't carefree jokes. They were anxious humor, the kind people use when something feels too real to laugh at directly. Posts joked about industry group chats going silent, PR teams canceling lunch, and lawyers refreshing emails. It was funny in the same way a fire alarm is funny when you're not sure if there's smoke. Then came the reactions that weren't reactions at all. Subtweets, vague captions, cryptic emojis, a sudden wave of unrelated motivational quotes from people who are usually loud. The internet reads silence like a confession, and neutrality like a disguise. So every non-response became content. Every unrelated post was framed as suspicious timing. Celebrity commentary poured gasoline on everything. Some artists liked posts that hinted at belief without saying it outright. Others posted general statements about truth and accountability, which somehow managed to make both sides angrier. A few public figures warned against spreading unverified claims, only to be accused of protecting power. No matter what anyone said, it was wrong to someone. The most explosive twist came from how fast the story widened. Names that weren't even mentioned in the original accusations started trending simply because people associated them with proximity. Collaborators, former partners, people who once shared a stage or studio session. In the court of public opinion, adjacency equals implication. Jaguar Wright's presence kept the temperature high. Her supporters argued that the backlash proved she was touching nerves. Her critics argued that attention was the goal. Both sides spoke with absolute certainty, which only guaranteed that nobody was actually listening. Every past interview she'd ever done was replayed, sliced, and recontextualized like a prophecy depending on who was sharing it. Then there was 50 Cent's gravitational pull. Even without a direct statement, his name bent the discourse around him. People debated whether the accusations aligned with his history of provocation or contradicted it. Some claimed the chaos itself was evidence of strategy. Others insisted that assuming intent was irresponsible. But assumptions don't slow down online. They multiply. What escalated outrage further was the question of motive. Why now? Timing in scandals is never random, and the lack of clarity invited theories. Some suggested retaliation. Others whispered about leverage. A few argued this was simply a storm of misinformation feeding on itself. Each theory gained traction because uncertainty invites imagination. Reaction channels exploded. Videos popped up dissecting screenshots, freezing frames, and narrating timelines with dramatic music like they were uncovering a heist. Titles promised breaking updates that delivered speculation. The algorithm rewarded speed over accuracy, and the cycle fed itself relentlessly. Meanwhile, calls for caution grew louder but less effective. Critics reminded viewers that audio can be manipulated, edited, or taken out of context. Supporters countered that dismissing allegations outright protects the powerful. The debate shifted from evidence to philosophy. Who deserves the benefit of the doubt? Institutions or individuals? Silence or speech? Public outrage peaked when people realized this wasn't going to resolve cleanly. Even if the alleged recordings were disproven tomorrow, the suspicion would linger. Allegations imprint themselves on reputations like ink that never fully fades. The damage isn't just in what's proven, it's in what's remembered. What made this phase especially volatile was the fatigue creeping in. Some viewers began questioning why serious accusations were being treated like entertainment. Those voices were quickly drowned out, but their presence marked a shift. Not everyone wanted to keep playing jury. Still, the spectacle rolled on. The industry's restraint remained striking. No mass denials, no coordinated statements, just a careful avoidance that only fueled curiosity. In controversies like this, every move is scrutinized, and doing nothing is interpreted as doing something. By the end of this stretch, the story had transformed again. It was no longer about the alleged recordings themselves. It was about trust, power, and who controls narratives when uncertainty goes viral. The accusations had outgrown their origin, becoming a mirror for how quickly speculation can harden into belief. And hanging over everything was the realization nobody wanted to say out loud yet. Even if the truth eventually surfaces, the internet has already written several endings, and it rarely deletes drafts. By the time the noise dropped from a scream to a constant hum, one thing was already clear. This situation had crossed the point of no return. Not because anything had been proven, but because perception had already done its damage. Allegations involving leaked recordings don't need confirmation to change reputations. They just need repetition. And by now, repetition was everywhere. The aftermath didn't arrive with closure. It arrived with suspicion. Every name connected to the conversation began moving differently online. Posts became vague. Captions turned motivational. Comments were limited. Silence became strategic. And in the internet's court, strategy always looks like guilt to someone. For Jaguar Wright, the consequences were immediate and polarizing. Supporters rallied harder, claiming the backlash itself proved she was exposing something real. They framed her as a whistleblower who'd been warning people for years, now facing resistance because the truth was inconvenient. Critics, on the other hand, accused her of leveraging shock value to stay relevant, arguing that accusations without evidence cause more harm than accountability. Both sides spoke loudly, and neither side budged an inch. What changed this time was scale. The accusations weren't dismissed as isolated rants anymore. They were folded into a larger narrative about power, silence, and who gets believed in an industry built on image control. Even people who doubted the claims admitted the conversation felt different now. Heavier, stickier, harder to brush off. For 50 Cent, the impact was quieter but more complex. His name alone carries weight, and weight attracts scrutiny. Even without confirmed involvement, association became enough to spark endless interpretation. Every old interview resurfaced. Every past feud was reframed. People searched for patterns where there may have been none, because once suspicion takes hold, context gets rewritten. What made the fallout especially dangerous was how it bled into unrelated spaces. Artists not named in any accusation suddenly found themselves fielding questions. Collaborations were re-examined. Lyrics were reinterpreted. Proximity became implication, and implication became conversation. In the digital age, distance doesn't protect you. The industry response remained calculated. No sweeping denials. No public crusades to clear names. Just controlled silence. That restraint may have been legal caution, but online it read as avoidance. And avoidance keeps rumors alive longer than denial ever could. Public perception fractured into layers. Some viewers hardened into belief, convinced that where there's smoke, there's fire. Others became equally convinced this was a case study in how quickly misinformation spreads. A third group, quieter but growing, became uneasy with the spectacle itself, questioning why alleged private material was being treated like entertainment. That discomfort mattered. It marked the moment when outrage stopped being exciting and started being exhausting. But exhaustion doesn't end a story. It just pushes it into the background, where it waits. The long-term consequence of allegations like this isn't exposure. It's erosion. Trust erodes. Credibility erodes. The benefit of the doubt disappears. Even if clarifications come later, they compete with memory, and memory is rarely fair. This is how reputations change without verdicts. Not through proof, but through association. Not through facts, but through conversation. Once a name becomes linked to alleged recordings, it carries that footnote indefinitely. Every future headline drags it back into relevance. The most sobering realization was this: even if definitive answers eventually surface, they won't rewind the moment. The internet doesn't unsee, it archives. And archives don't care about nuance or timing. They preserve the chaos exactly as it unfolded. This chapter didn't end with clarity. It ended with a shift. A shift in how people talk, how they listen, how quickly they assume. The story stopped being about what might have been leaked and became about how easily belief forms when uncertainty meets influence. As the trend cooled, the accusations didn't disappear. They settled into the ecosystem, ready to resurface whenever convenient. Because that's how scandals work now. They don't resolve, they recycle. And hanging over everything is the same unresolved tension. If nothing comes of this, who was harmed? And if something eventually does, who waited too long to ask questions? That's the real aftermath. Not answers, but doubt. Doubt that lingers quietly, shaping conversations long after the headlines fade. Now let's pause the noise for 1 second, because if this story had you leaning closer to the screen, you already know why it hit so hard. Allegations like this don't explode because they're proven. They explode because they're possible. And in an industry built on image, power, and silence, possibility is more dangerous than facts. So don't front like you weren't invested. You watch the reactions. You read between the lines. You notice who stayed quiet and who suddenly got loud. That's how stories like this live longer than the trend cycle. They turn everyone into a detective with an opinion. Now smash that like button like it owes you money and just tried to disappear without paying. Drop a comment and say it straight. Do you think this is another case of unverified chaos going viral? Or do you believe there's more behind these accusations than people want to admit? Don't be vague. The comment section is the real courtroom. And everybody's already arguing. If you're not subscribed yet, You're missing the point. This channel doesn't wait for clean narratives or power-approved explanations. We break down the mess while it's still unfolding, while the silence is loud, and while the internet is still guessing. No filters, no easy answers, just sharp breakdowns and uncomfortable questions. And trust me, this story isn't done. Allegations don't vanish. They resurface when you least expect them, usually attached to a new headline or an old clip nobody forgot. When that happens, we'll be right back here pulling the thread again. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay locked in. Because in the world of fame, the most dangerous thing isn't what gets leaked, it's what people start believing before the truth catches up. Truth tattle.